Wanderers. I'm Abu Laith. Sorry it's been kind of a long wait for the next video, but I tested positive for COVID, and so after a couple weeks of quarantine, that kind of got most of my energy focused for the last month. But we are back. And as promised, here is a travel video on visiting Bahrain, the Pearl of the Persian Gulf. So first, some cultural facts, notes about Bahrain. So Bahrain is a small country, about 1.7 million people. About half of those are national Bahrainis, and about half are from everywhere else in the world. So Bahrain is actually an island, or to be more accurate, it's a collection of about 50 or so small islands together in the Persian Gulf, right beside the Arabian Peninsula. So if you happen to be visiting Bahrain, or you're on your way there soon, or just want to try somewhere maybe a bit off the map, it's a good place to check out. So the best things to visit in Bahrain would be forts, the National Museum, shopping in the Manama Souk, and hanging out with locals and learning some of the religious history and religious culture there in Bahrain. So first, when I visited the island, I went to the Qalat al-Bahrain, or the Bahrain Fort, or sometimes it's also called the Portuguese Fort. So the building that is standing was built in the 15th, 16th century, but that same site has probably had fortifications going back to 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. So I really had no idea before I got there, but Bahrain is actually the site of an ancient civilization called Dilmun. And they were known for trade throughout the Arab world, to as far away as India and Malaysia, and with Africa. And you see evidence of that all over the country in artifacts from other cultures that have been found there. I love ancient history, and I was completely surprised by all that I've learned there. So another cultural note, the name Bahrain in Arabic means two seas. There's a little bit of debate on what that actually refers to, but probably the best guess is that Bahrain has kind of a secret freshwater sea under the island, and so in various places on the island there are little springs, wells that actually have fresh water, and even throughout the shallow coastal waters there are spots where fresh water actually bubbles up. So Bahrain, historically, their claim to fame was that it was site of some of the world's best pearls. And before the discovery of oil, it was really just a bunch of small villages and pearl divers. That was what made them famous. Of course, oil changed everything and rapidly modernized the country and created a great period of prosperity that really is just underway in the last 100 years. So, the fort I visited, the Bahrain Fort, is pretty cool. You can climb over things, really awesome architecture and a view of the city, but also of the sea. It's really nice. And you can see some of the ongoing archaeological excavations of those other periods of history, even down to the Dilmun age, right beside the fort. There's a little museum, walkable distance from the fort as well. Very well done, and I learned a lot about the history, and especially the ancient history of Bahrain from that museum. So if you're into history, there are a number of other forts that you should probably check out. There's Rifa Fort. Then there's also Arad Fort. But the most popular tourist site on the island is probably the Bahrain National Museum. Definitely worth checking out for the full scope of the history of that country. How this ancient civilization got started, how they flourished, and how they disappeared. And then, especially the modern history, how did they transform themselves from a small collection of pearl divers into one of the strongest economies in the world. So all that is there at the museum. So other things that you might want to check out is the Manama Souk. So souk is just the Arabic word for market. So you would enter this area through the Bab el Bahrain, or the Bahrain Gate. Very famous and popular, kind of a colonial style. And in it, it's kind of the traditional old world, narrow lanes, shops, spices, clothing, everything you can imagine. And especially gold. Huge gold markets there. It's really popular, and it's been kind of a mainstay of downtown Manama, the capital, for a long time. Another thing to check out that I personally enjoyed, and where we spent probably most of our time, was just spending time with locals. So definitely Arabic helps a lot, especially with the older generation. So we got to hear lots of stories. The Bahraini people are very welcoming, definitely embody Arab hospitality. They love having guests, love introducing them to their country, their culture, and love telling stories. There's definitely a air of sadness from some of the older people when they talk about how life used to be, the slower pace, and then of some of the great coral reefs, freshwater wells that used to be common throughout the country. A lot of these have been destroyed in order to reclaim more usable space for the island so they can build more. So definitely the older generation has a bit of fondness for the Eden that was lost in order to pave the way for the modern giant that they've become. And then the last thing I would suggest, if you're interested in religious culture, religious history, learning about something maybe that you haven't had much exposure to, Bahrain is a good place to actually learn a little bit about Shia Islam. Now, Shia worldwide make up only about 10% of the Muslim population, but they're actually the majority of Bahrain. So some of the holidays or religious observances that Shia have can be very different from what most Muslims celebrate. So if you happen to be there during one of those times, you can really get a glimpse of something kind of unique. Because a lot of the world's Shia Muslims live in countries like Iraq and Iran that can be kind of difficult for a Westerner, an American, to go visit and to observe for themselves. But Bahrain is a pretty modernized country, easy to get to, and you can go to your big mall in the morning, you can eat at your American or Western restaurant chains for lunch, and then in the evening spend time drinking tea, hearing stories, and learning some religious history you may not have known. So for all these reasons, I definitely recommend a trip to Bahrain, and hope that you find your way to the island and enjoy your stay on the Pearl of the Persian Gulf. Thanks. Stay tuned for our next episode coming to you real soon. Thanks.